93 of the CRICKETher Weekly. Sid, did you get anything nice for Christmas?
I did. I got these amazing binoculars, Raf.
Oh.
They're special Nikon Travelite X. And
this really sounds like the beginning of one of those
we are not sponsored by them.
Terrible wooden American adverts where we have to talk very naturally about binoculars.
They're brilliant, Raf. You can see all the way to Australia. I mean,
to Australia?
It's a bit dark, but you know, they're great. And I also have to thank Andy Bell, Lauren Bell's dad, because he actually did the market research for these binoculars back in the summer, because he got some new binoculars and he showed them to me and let me try them, and they were so good that.
And who got you those binoculars, Sid?
Well, Raf. There you go. Thanks, Raf.
You're welcome.
Anyway, shall we get on with the show?
Yes. So, what we're going to do is, when we're recording this, it's Boxing Day in the UK, so we're near the end of the year. So in this week's podcast, we are going to do a review of 2021. So we're going to talk about good things that happened, bad things that happened, everything that we remember. And then in next week's show, when it will be, I think it will be the 2nd of January when we're recording, we're going to do a bit of a look ahead to 2022. So we thought that we'd break those two things into two separate episodes. Great. So, 2021.
Well, what was your highlight, Raf? Go on. What was it?
Okay. Well, this is not necessarily going to fly too well with some of our Australian viewers / listeners, and we'll also probably play to that ever-present stereotype that we are a bit anti-Australian. But my favourite moment of the year was India breaking Australia's winning streak in ODIs.
How did you experience that moment, Raf? Can you remember it?
Yes, I remember it very well. We were driving to a match because it was obviously still in our season in the UK because it was in September. And we were driving to a match and we were listening on the radio. We kind of so India had nearly broken it in the preceding match, hadn't they? And then there'd been all that controversy about was it or wasn't it a no ball, and I'd been really disappointed. And then they did it in the next game. So we were listening on the radio, and when it happened, I was kind of whooping a lot and being very happy, and it was very exciting.
I wasn't whooping a lot because I was driving around the M25.
You were, yes.
Sensibly. So
well done you. But it was quite a joyous moment, and I think even Australian fans will appreciate that moment for what it was, which was actually the kind of culmination of a really hard-fought ODI series and a series between two teams who are kind of near the top of the world and a really exciting series, and actually that's what we need in women's cricket, really.
Absolutely.
So I think that even from an Australian perspective, you can probably appreciate that in retrospect. So that was my moment of the year. What was your moment of the year, Sid?
Well, I really enjoyed the RHF Trophy final, and not in fairness, not just because I'm a Vipers fan. We've not made any secret of that. But
You're a Vipers fan?
Apparently, that's what they tell me. No, it was a really good game. There were some really good performances, and it was a really exciting game in the end. I mean, it came down to the Vipers needing quite a lot of runs. They had plenty of time to do it, but then they only had like 3 or 4 wickets left. And Emily Windsor and Tara Norris kind of grinding out those runs at the end and made for a very exciting finish. But there was also some top performances. The Diamonds didn't start particularly well. That they went off very slowly and they started to lose wickets as well. And you thought, oh, this is just going to fizzle out into nothing. But then Amy Campbell, who is a little bit of a veteran now. I think she's almost 30, if not perhaps 30. Actually,
yeah, which is not old in any
definitely not.
walk of life other than professional sport.
But she wasn't a pro last year. She's actually been snapped up by Central Sparks for this year. I guess partly on the basis of performances like that. So she came in down the order and hit runs and kind of made it into a game. For me, she was the player of the match. She didn't get the player of the match award, but for me, she was, and put the Diamonds in a position where they could potentially go on to win the match. Beth Langston bowled really, really well. One of the best spells of bowling that we've seen. It's really weird, actually, that we wound up with a game where the two best individual performances for me were Langston and Campbell, and yet the Vipers won the game because they were able to grind it out at the end, and it was really exciting finish to the game. I went down from the press box where I was annoying everyone by pacing up and down, went down and sat with the Vipers fans, and really enjoyed the moment they hit the winning runs. Got to say, as a fan, didn't enjoy them grinding it out particularly. It was kind of heart-stopping, but that was my moment of the year.
Yeah, meanwhile I had to rewrite my match report about 4 times. So thanks, Diamonds and Vipers, for that. Really appreciated. No, it was a really good game, wasn't it? So I guess if we're thinking about our moment of the English season, then that would be yours. If I was going to pick a moment of my English season, then, and this may be a bit predictable, but hey, it was Alice Capsey scoring that half-century in her first match at Lord's during the 100. And the reason why that was my moment of the English season was because it was the first time that other journalists, and particularly journalists who mainly follow men's cricket, actually kind of sat up and took notice and went, "Oh, hang on a minute, who's this? This is somebody who's really going to be a star." And you know, you and me had been kind of backing her for a couple of years before that, and actually saying to people, "Oh, she's really great. She's one for the future."
Well, yeah, we were like, she's going to be a star, but this was the moment that.
Well, she kind of became a star, yeah. And so, yeah, it was one of those kind of times when journalists are kind of scrabbling around in the press box going, "Hang on, what do we know about this person?" And obviously one of the vindicating moments for me was as a journalist, this can sound a bit up myself, but hey, was the fact that obviously the piece that everyone then hit on when they were Googling her was my interview that I'd done with her in The Guardian a few weeks previously as a kind of preview of the 100. And so that was quite fun and quite a kind of a nice professional moment for me in my journalism capacity, with my journalism hat on. Obviously now I've got my Santa hat on, but then I have my journalism hat on. And obviously a really nice moment for her and for Invincibles to perform that well at Lord's, and to kind of beat London Spirit on their home ground was it was quite something, wasn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was the moment that Alice Capsey really became a star, I think, and you know came to the notice of the wider public, and you know I think there's a good argument that she's she's certainly the best known English cricketer that hasn't played for England, and I think that now she's one of the best known players, you know, full stop, regardless of who's played for England. You know, she kind of broke out with the 100, and as one of the top performers in the 100, you know, her kind of profile in this country is just like soared. And
globally,
people like my
well.
85-year-old dad know who she is.
Yeah. And I think globally as well, because obviously the 100 was kind of the most high profile tournament, although she did then go on and perform well in the other domestic competitions that are maybe a little bit less high profile, didn't she?
Yeah, and in fact for me a more important moment in the trajectory of Alice Capsey, if you like, is
now doing Alice Capsey moments of the year.
But the most important moment for me is actually the Charlotte Edwards Trophy final, and that was for me. That was her wet Tuesday night in Stoke moment. What do I mean by that? Well, for those of you that don't follow men's football, there's a player called Lionel Messi who played most of his career at Barcelona, and although he was widely regarded as one of the best players in the world, there was always a caveat that he'd played at Barcelona with a particular, you know, in a particular climate or particular kinds of pitches, and people always said, you know, but could he do it on a wet Tuesday night in Stoke? And you know, for Alice Capsey, coming in the Charlotte Edwards Trophy final was more of a wet Tuesday night in Stoke, if the Aegeus Bowl will forgive me for saying that about it. There was a completely different kind of pressure on her.
Yeah.
So in the 100, the pressure comes from, you know, the fact that you've got a huge number of fans in the stadium, and you know you've got the television on you and all that kind of stuff. But there's a completely different kind of pressure in the Charlotte Edwards Cup final, because now Alice Capsey's coming in with the expectation that she will win the game for them. Okay, so the pressure in the 100 is not about necessarily winning the game, because you've got your Marizanne Caps and your Dane van Niekerks and, you know, all of those people that are your huge superstar. They're the ones that are expected to win the game, as indeed Cap did in the final. But Capsey at that point in the Charlotte Edwards Trophy final, she came in, she was like, the expectation was that if she's the player that we all think she is, she will now win the game for them, and she did. She ramped her first ball for 4, she slogged Katie Levick back over her head for 6, and then after that She just did game management. She
Yeah.
played really sensibly and, just did what she needed to do to get them over the line. It was fantastic, mature innings of a player that I firmly believe is very capable and should be the best player in the world, in 5 years' time.
Okay. I still think there would have been more pressure on her in her first ever match at
Yeah,
the home of
different
cricket
kind
in
of
front
pressure.
15,000 people, but we can agree to disagree on that. So yeah, we've talked about kind of overall moments of the year globally and also domestic moments of the year. What about with an England focus? Because obviously we are to some extent, as well as journalists, kind of England supporters. So what was your England moment of the year, Sid?
We saw quite a lot of England cricket this year, didn't we?
We did.
18 days of cricket, is that right?
Yes.
Which is perhaps more than we've seen in any summer in the last 10 years or so.
Oh, must be the most ever, surely, at home.
Well, it won't quite be the most ever because there were some summers way back that had 3 tests, right?
Yeah, but that's only 12 days. If my maths is correct, and then they wouldn't have necessarily played. They wouldn't have played ODIs and T20s.
18 days of cricket,
Yeah.
But really we only saw the complete England performance once, and that was on that very last day, the game against New Zealand at Canterbury. It will be remembered for Tammy Beaumont's 100, but it was a complete England performance, and it was the one day this year where they've really delivered what Heather Knight keeps saying they're capable of doing. So, and it's a bit weird really, because England have, carried on winning games. They've won all the series that they've played this year, but they've never quite been delivering the kind of quality of cricket that Heather Knight really wants them to. But on that last day, it all came together for them, and it was fantastic. Not just Tammy's 100, but the way everybody played that day. They just utterly steamrolled New Zealand, and that's the England that we all want to see, and we hope will challenge Australia in the Ashes and the World Cup. But they're going to have to kind of bring that level of cricket to almost every day of the Ashes, to almost every game in the World Cup, if they are going to challenge Australia.
Yeah, my favourite moment was Sophie Devine saying that it's just one of those games that you flush down the dunny.
And you got that in The Guardian.
I did get it in The Guardian, yeah. I was impressed with that. No, in all seriousness, that was a good day. I think my favourite moment from kind of an England perspective was more at the start of the summer though, in the multi-format point series against India. And I don't know, maybe I'm stretching the definition of moment here, but it was the kind of rise of Sophia Dunkley, and I guess embodied by a couple of innings. The first was her innings on Test debut at Bristol. I think she hit 74, and she was unbeaten, and it was only Heather Knight declaring that meant that she couldn't go on and get what looked like was going to be a kind of a Test 100 on debut, which of course would have been very special, but in the context of the match, that was the situation, and that was the decision that was made, and fair enough.
That's cricket.
Of course, Test cricket particularly, you have to time your declarations. So there was that, and then of course I think it was at Taunton against India in the ODI when she hit that innings, and England looked like they were wobbling, they were a bit in trouble, and she really just brought back calm to proceedings, to the run chase, and really kind of helped to bring them over the line. So yeah, and so nice for a player who we've backed again for a number of years, and have often said, she's scoring so many runs in domestic cricket, she really should be having a kind of nailed down spot in the England team. But she's been on the outskirts for a few years, and so it's been really nice to see all of her hard work come to fruition this year.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think I've got some sort of mixed memories of that test. I think that overall we've had 2 tests this year, of course, haven't we? And they've both been draws, and they've both been kind of disappointing in that. I
don't agree, but
respect.
Go on.
How do you look back on the test from an England perspective, Raf? Do you think there's positives?
Well, I don't. I mean, I think we can't. Yes, both of those tests. So we're talking about England v India at Bristol in June, and Australia v India. In Queensland, it was late September, early October, wasn't it? And they were both draws, but they were very different draws, I think. For me, the Australia-India test was a bit disappointing. And it was disappointing because Australia totally handed all of the control to India, despite having talked up, we're going to be really aggressive and we're going to be really exciting ahead of the test. They then won the toss and put India into bat, which is just absolutely baffling in a 4-day test. That's not what you do. So there's that. And then, when they did get to the crease, there wasn't really a huge amount of time left in the game, but also they didn't really bat particularly aggressively, and neither side did really. India totally dominated, but after you bat for nearly 2 days, and there's a bit of rain around, it's going to be a draw. So I felt that that game was really a little bit dull, a little bit disappointingly dull. Of course, it wasn't helped by rain. For me, the England v India test was really positive for the cause of more women's test cricket. And that, it just goes to show that just because the result was a draw doesn't mean that it's a bad game. And obviously people who aren't fans of cricket don't understand that, but it was the fact that each of the days, the kind of momentum, I did feel swung back and forth a bit. I did feel for all of the days like an England win was the most likely result, though. I thought England played overall pretty well. There was difficulty because they didn't have they only had one frontline spinner in the end in Eccleston, and they could really have done with another one, and so that was a bit problematic. But I felt that they batted well, and and they did get India to follow on, and they did really come quite close to winning. I really thought they were going to win, and then the last session and a half, Snehrana and Tanya Bhatia just dug in. And that was great to watch because, despite the fact, again, I had to rewrite my match report, da-di-da-di-da, but they really upended what we thought was going to be an England, what I certainly thought was going to be an England win, and that was actually really special to see that, and to see that likely result overturned, and by two people's, two quite young players, quite inexperienced players, kind of actually coming to the fore and going, no, we're not going to roll over, and so therefore actually achieving the draw was quite an achievement. That's what I felt.
I've got a little bit of a different perspective on that. Looking back on it, I sort of feel that on that last afternoon kind of showed that England's bowling is just a bit toothless at the moment, and that's where England's weak point is. That they when it really matters, they don't have the ability to take wickets with the particular bowling attack that they've been going with, and they need a bit more aggression in the bowling, and the bowling overall is just feeling a bit tired at the moment with some of the selections that they've been making, and I think that's going to be one of England's big challenges is to over the next couple of years that they're going to have to deal with. We'll expect some retirements, and they're going to have to really up what they're doing in their bowling attack. And I think that the test really showed that the fact that they weren't able to take those last couple of wickets because a couple of Indians were able to lock down people with very little experience of doing that. These players are not players that have played a lot of multi-day cricket, and yet the Indians were able to completely shut down the English attack. They looked toothless, and for me that was a bit disappointing. But
okay, well, you can't argue that we haven't got lots of exciting young bowlers kind of coming up through the ranks.
Yeah, it's just that they're all waiting there, and some of them are getting quite old now. It's like our exciting new bowlers are. Anyway.
Okay, so overall then, Sid, 2021, was it a good year for women's cricket?
I think it could certainly have been a worse year. England obviously played a lot of games. Some other countries played rather less games. I think that in the first world, in England and Australia in particular, overall, the top women's sports have come out of the pandemic okay. We had a lot of worries going into the pandemic that everybody would suffer, and actually in this country it seems that soccer, which is obviously the leading women's team sport, has definitely come out of it okay. It's doing okay. We've seen that the soccer league here has signed a huge new sponsorship deal. So things looking positive there. Cricket, we've had the launch of the 100, and things are looking positive for us here. But obviously we know that in other countries things have not been as good, have they, Raf?
Yeah, kind of epitomised by the abandonment of the World Cup qualifiers halfway through, and the fact that ended up being a bit of a shambles, and the ICC deciding that it was just going to be done on rankings, which obviously screwed over a couple of teams quite badly. That was very disappointing, and there are countries like Sri Lanka, for example, who have played very little cricket since the pandemic, and I don't think that we should forget that. I certainly think from an England perspective, things have gone pretty well actually this year. We'll await and see what happens with the Ashes, followed closely by the World Cup, because I think that is a real pinch point and a real risky moment. But I guess we'll talk about that in next week's episode. But touch wood, the England team have remained largely or pretty much COVID free. I think there haven't been kind of outbreaks. They've been able to push on with their usual schedule. As you say, we had a really busy summer. Maybe to some extent, some of the internationals, the England players did look a little bit tired because of that workload. But the 100 was extraordinarily successful from a women's cricket perspective. We've kind of, they've earned those pay rises that the ECB have announced, absolutely. So I think from an England perspective, it's been a good year. From a global perspective, it's been another difficult year, I would say. So yeah. Anyway, that's nearly it for 2021. By the time we see you again, or you hear us again, it will be 2022, and we'll be looking ahead to the next 12 months and see what that's going to bring. Thank you so much for all your support in 2021.
Yep.
It means such a lot, and I think that what's great about CRICKETher is that we have built up a bit of a community, it feels like, and we've got people who regularly comment and reply to us on Twitter and who really engage with what we're doing, and that's what it's all about. That's what women's cricket is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, and people coming up to us at matches and saying hello, and it's really nice. So we love being part of the community, and we've enjoyed it this year. We'll enjoy it next year and for many years to come.
And we'd love to hear about any of your favourite moments from 2021 as well. So do comment below the line, do send us a tweet, send us a message, and maybe we'll read some of those out on next week's episode. But for now, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.